Hello. Let's talk about automated test systems, and maybe the topics will cover seems obvious. Yet I made so many mistakes and misunderstandings on dozens of projects that I welcome you today at our clinic. And my name is Dmitry, and I'll be your attendant doctor for next 40 minutes. Well, our medical treatment scheme will go through symptomology, diagnosis, therapy, and preventive treatment. Well, first of all, symptomatology. Uh, when I came as a consult to a project or I led some teams, actually people knew that they had some problems. They simply were in denial of the impact of those problems on the project. So let's go to the symptoms and see if that concerns you. Well, here's the list of symptoms. If it takes more than 20% of overall development time to actually support your automated system, to actualize your tests, probably you're spending more time to keep your automation living rather than saving time by automation means itself. And next one is if 20% of your automated model isn't working. Simply every time you're trying to launch your regression, your pass rate is less than 80%. 20% and more of a dead weight of your automation, it's a bad symptom. Next one is technical debt ratio. I will be talking about the debt ratio later, so let's not stop there. If it takes more than one night to launch your automated regression, it's not an automation, because automation is always about reducing time to market and saving your expenses to integrate into DevOps pipelines. So the major goals is to make it quick and simple. Yet if it takes more than one night to launch your automation, it's not an automation. Actually, there is a different point. If it takes more than one night to develop your auto test, probably you have some problems with the key model itself, or with environment, or maybe it's your tools. And right, we have some problems. And if anyone felt uneasy now because of the symptoms, let's proceed on how to solve it. First of all, let's gather rescue team. Turn on some epic music from Rescue Rangers. All right, external expert. That shouldn't be the house MD in the flesh. That's just some guy who has some consciousness about automation. So he will provide you with a fresh look on your system. That's actually a mandatory thing. Just someone from the side. Next one is a team lead. The guy who is responsible for technical decisions for the project itself. And if it so happens that you don't have such a guy, just point at someone and say, you're responsible now for our system. Next one, well, there are some problems which requires communications. Actually, usually it's a manager who reaches agreements with our systems, peoples, and everything. But like in the first case, if you don't have such a manager, just point at someone and say, you're responsible for communications. And of course, the stakeholders. Those who run your automation tests, those who analyze them, those who develop tests in your frameworks, those are stakeholders. Invite them as well. And so, we gathered the team. And the first thing we should do is to state the diagnosis. What's happened to our system? I would recommend to start with a simple brainstorm. We just gathering the team and starting dividing the problems. It's better to divide the problems on the start by the types: administrative, technical, and model ones. Different between them because the difference by the people who is going to solve them. Different means administrative is all about reaching the agreement. Environment related or critical settings, blockers, everything else. Technical is everything about the tools, the code itself, about the engineers, and just pure code. And next one, the last one, but but the prior one maybe. It's a model. Model problems is the source of a lot of problems because it's the head. Everything starts from your QA model and from the test, how do you compose your auto-test systems. And actually, I will provide you later with examples of those problems and how will we deal with them. But I'll follow. So, let's summarize. Team up and write down all the problems which people will provide you with, and divide them by management, technical, and model problems. Easy enough, right? Next thing. Well, expert estimation is a good thing, but the numbers are better. Because people's opinion is often subjective. I met the both ways when people ignored the huge problem because they just got used to it, or were overexcited about some problem just because it's creeping on them right here, right now. So we need some numbers. And here comes the instruments. Task tracking instruments, static code analyzers, and metric aggregators. You can use them to collect the analysis itself. I would say from the start it's not a Jira promo, but I will be showing you instruments I recently used and most popular one. Let's start with task tracking tools. Here we are, with tracking task. A lot of teams makes a huge mistake by using a task tracking system for time tracking. It's not a time tracking, it's task tracking. You see, we here pointed out that we have a QA task, but we brought some components. It's actualization. We're not developing a new test, we actualization the old one. And we made a description why did we did that. Exactly. So later we can collect our information in this beautiful dashboard. You can see there are 11% of different tasks, well, maybe it's tool development or something like this, and 4% actualization. It's a good number. And we can keep track on the trend, collecting the data from our task tracking system. What are we doing and what are the problems are really important for us? What is taking so much time from us? Stop. Once again. And don't read it. It's not a joke, it's just an example that you don't have an excuse. If you don't have Jira, once I had a project when using Jira was forbidden. And I had to develop my own Jira in Excel file with VBA scripts. No, really, I used VBA and created my own Jira to track the tasks at the time I spent it for it. There. We can collect a lot of metrics such as pass rate, and to which conclusions can we come? So you see that 16% of the automation failed. The pass rate is poor. It's near the deadline, near the fire line of 20%, like I said. But we can see a comparable picture in manual regression. That means that the problem is not in automation tools, but in the environment or the system itself. So, you see, we can come to a conclusion simply by looking at metrics. And nothing is as good as a good old robo. It never lies, but always blames. It's a static code analyzer, like SonarQube. You can see here the example. It found two mistakes in the code. First, an unused variable. Second one is an empty block of code. Of course, it can bring some mistakes in our code, and that would be a problem. But first, Sonar told us about them to delete them. And actually, the rules application, you can turn on and turn off the rules of your static code analyzer. You can bring new ones. You can develop your own rules according to your development framework and ensure that everyone complies to best practices. So the core matrix it provides is duplication, technical debt, and technical debt ratio. Duplications is simply copy-paste. I won't tell anything about it. But the technical debt, well, Sonar tries to guess how many days you'd have to spend to fix the issues you collected in your code. And next one is a technical debt ratio. That's actually a ratio of that number to the days supposedly that would be spent to create your project from the scratch. Of course, it's good to be in A league, but if you fell down to a D league, probably it would be easier to burn your project with flames and start a new one rather than fixing all the issues you've gathered there. That's another project example. Here you can see there is bugs, vulnerabilities, and simple code smells. It's not errors, it's stylistic violations. You can see basic statistics, but, well, you see, scanning is good. But it's even better to prevent those mistakes to get inside your code. And here is an example of a merge request blocked by Sonar. You can click there and see how many issues there, and it's all inside the Git. You can click on your merge request, and you see Sonar created a blame. We can find the line and look at the code itself, what Sonar did it like that. Of course, there are ways to trick Sonar. People told me it the first day integrated the system. But, well, you see, I'll find who did it. So just don't trick the Sonar. Let's summarize about analysis activities. First of all, we're trying to provide some expert evaluation. We're dividing problems by types, and later we collect on statistics about it. Which problem is the most important one? By the way, we can find new ones. That's good. And we're coming to some conclusion. We're stating a diagnosis. Now let's go to the therapy. Well, the therapy, first, which problems do we have? We have to create backlog with the tasks. That's probably what we should do from the start. We have to provide estimates, how much time or how complex the problem solving of this specific issue. And we should plan the first sprint. Actually, agile ceremonies fits this process perfectly, because you can review the result and see if it brought the fruits you expected. And we have estimation, we have our impact, and we come into a simple priority formula. It's just the time taken by those issues for some period and the complexity to solve them. That would be our priority. So we have a prioritized backlog, and let's go to the problems, actually, and solutions. I'll start with administrative ones. For example, it takes really more than one night, more than 6 hours to launch your Autotest regression, and probably you should just order a new virtual machine to launch them. That's communication. Or QA team interferes with your estimation QA team by messing with some critical settings. That's a case of change windows, or maybe you should just make them notify the whole team prior to changing some settings. Or uncoordinated deployment. Sometimes you don't have a dedicated environment, and working with the development on one environment. If you share it, well, again, chain windows again, and of course, the ultimate solution will be to get your separate environment. But there are actually another technical. And I cannot bring you some typical problems. I'm just brought a few ones, because technicals are various problems. For example, on one project, we have a simple mistake. Was Selenium lost in the middle of automation process, lost the browser. There was no explanation, and actually everyone ignored it. It's a good example of how people ignore small problem, which actually has a severity on the project. Because when we log time for analysis, which we spent for this mistake, and the time for restarting it, we came to a conclusion it takes enormous amount of time. It's about half an hour, but for every engineer a day. And it took just a few days to develop a dirty hack. We just remember it at the start, the process ID in Windows, and when we lost our browser again, we tried to find it by the ID, and that actually helped. So 2 days, and we saved about a week per month of human resources. Well, maybe there would be some problems with Autotest passage. Remember the previous one when we were going to order a new virtual machine? Actually, that can be solved through technical means. You can use Dockers or simply replace some time-consuming steps with direct API or SQL injections. That would solve the problem too. And my favorite one, problems with test model execution. Actually, automation, it's not just automation scripts or your automation framework. It's the tools which are using to execute it. It's everyone uses here Jenkins, maybe ILM, maybe JAS. You're using some system to track your auto test and to execute them. Sometimes those systems brings more harm than profit, and you might consider replacing them or developing some way to integrate them. Once again, choose your instrument wisely. It's a common delusion to use a tool, improper tool, because of just duck syndrome or political reasons. For example, if you have a React.js application, it would be appropriate to use a Facebook-provided testing tool based on JS. There will be tools, and you will evade a lot of problems you would rather meet if you use well-known Selenium WebDriver. Why? It doesn't fit it. But probably you meet heavy resistance from both engineer and management side, so that's on you and your result. The model problems. Most sophisticated one. That's all about how do you compose your tests, how do you use them. There could be auto tests which includes more than 10 elementary actions. I wrote there 36 because after this number, auto test becomes unmaintainable. Without question, you can throw it away or decompose it, do something with it, because it's unmaintainable. You're gonna spend more time on it, and it will bring you profit. So, if you have some legacy test about 20 elementary steps, well, probably you can fix them later. But it's better to stay in the bounds of 10 elementary actions for one auto test. Next problem is the lack of initial test data. Maybe if you worked in big companies or met big projects, you found out that some prior steps required in the test to reach some system state. For example, to verify if transactions goes from card to card, you have to create 2 cards, right? And people include those steps into the test itself. It's a really wrong action. First, sometimes those steps takes more place than the verification itself. Next one, you cannot reuse them because you will copy-paste those actions from test to test, and it's bad. So you can create a universal tests scripts for creating test data via direct SQL injection or just creating some business universal test to create the data for your actual verification. And actually, like I said, test parameterization saves a lot of your time because creating one parameterized script, especially in automation, you can cover a lot of verification rather than one with hard code. And I'll bring you an example just on a second slide. But first, let's see, we also have mistakes like multiple verification or assets in one test. One test, one verification. It's best practice. And by validating it, you're bringing your more time for analyze expenses. And so, first of all, you should localize the problem. And if you have a lot of verifications in one test, it will be harder. And another point is, for example, you have 10 verifications in one test. The first one failed, the test failed. You skipped 9. Well, that's not the most appropriate way to use the test. So try to comply to best practices. And of course, there can be a lot of repeating actions, just a copy-paste, a lot of bad vendors use it, we don't. You can use universalized tests and make them reusable, so you wouldn't have to copy-paste your code, and actually that will expand your coverage. Let's see how I applied it. That's just some code. You see it's messy. You cannot read it. It's hard to read. And 300 lines of code. Scaling to the project, it's 3,000 lines of code, like that. When I came to the project, I didn't nothing but asking an engineer, do you have some ideas on how to fix it? And actually he had. He told me that I think I can create a driver, data-driven driver to for our testing system, and used JSONs and made the tests actually parameterized. And this became this. It's readable. It's 65 lines of code instead of 300. It's a drastic change for our maintenance times, and of course every line of code requires maintenance, so the less lines of code you have, the better. And data-driven tests actually a good thing. Next one, planning. People hate to create plans. They think it's unnecessary because plans always change, and they should. It just spend 10 minutes to create a high-level plan, because when you reach some point, you can see if you reached the goal, and if you didn't, what to do with it. You can change your plan according to that, and actually that's a good thing too. Just spend 10 minutes, so you will create some psychological milestones for your project. So let's summarize the therapy activities. Task prioritizing, drafting roadmap, appointing responsibilities, who are responsible for that, and fix it, come on, that's good. Let's try to evade our recurrence. That's my personal pain. You see, the first time I performed as an assessment of the project, I got the feedback half a year after my assessment. That was brilliant. And everything was fine. I had really cool measurements, like from 600 human resources per month were reduced only to 200 hours of time taken for actualization. Well, 3 times less time took actualization, and it was good. Coverage expanded. Everything worked fine, and the system was stable. A year later, I gathered in our feedback. and everything gone. 50% of system didn't work. Universal tests were broken. People created their own custom solutions instead of using tools which we provided them back then. What didn't happen? I was young and stupid. And I forgot about one thing, team rotations and documentation. So, one thing I didn't do. I should have write down the rules on how to work on my system. The more sophisticated system is, the more effective it is, but easier it is to break it. And we did just that. We used it the wrong way. We had to create a handbook of best practices, and we had to create a registry so anyone could open it and find quick how to use our tools and how it should be. Next one is a code review. On one project, well, 2 years ago, we've been looking through one project, and there was a comment of 2013 to do by Thursday. That's why Sonar thinks of to-dos like of mistakes, and if you're leaving a to-do, it's anyway better rather leaving nothing. Make sure you will close it to an estimated time. So you have to ensure that everyone follows agreement, which means don't scan your code, but watch for yourself and for that guy. And don't be scared of creating cross reviews from junior to senior engineer and vice versa. Because actually, when junior looking at the code of senior, first he learns. Second one, he asks questions. What did you do it? And sometimes senior engineer says, but I'll, because I'll rewrite it, refactor it, sorry. So that's easy to create some pairs to reject one after another. Next one is healthcare. At least 20% of development time should be reserved for technical refactoring and development. On one project, we had a team with a technical Friday, and actually we had no project tasks on the Friday, because this time was for refactoring, for development new tools, and testing new approaches. And actually, the team who had that practice was more effective than their colleagues. So if you cannot afford that, at least multiply your estimated efforts by 20%, because that's a technical debt. Let's summarize the therapy activities. Write down the agreements. It's a mandatory, because you reach something, make it solid. Document the system. Keep the track of its development in the right way, which is supposed to. Recheck it on a regular basis, because any time something may go wrong. And, well, probably that's all. I'll just summarize everything I told today. Collect the statistics. It will help you to determine and localize the problems. Watch the symptoms. Build a team if needed, if everything already gone wrong. Classify and prioritize the problems. It would be easier if you fulfilled the previous points. And focus on the main problems, of course. They will bring you most of the results. The last one, but not the last, is documentation your system, fixing the best practices, and do not make recurrences. Well, be healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And a question, there is a situation in company, that then there is a big week in company, It's bosses from business, yes, you know. And he come to this boss and told about this presentation, and he said, I reckon it's bullshit. What's it? I don't understand no single words. Why I should lose my money and increase time to market for these manipulations? I don't understand. Please explain me.
Well, the most appropriate way to explain it to the engineers is to provide them with the previous results. If you don't have ones, well, at least make a graphic of estimates. You see, spending time for refactoring and spending time for improvements can actually boost the development process. For example, you can promise him that we will make up to twice more automation tests in less time if we spend at least 20% of our overall time for activities of healthcare. And for another example is the time reduction for automation. Well, you can speak from two sides. First one is actually time to market, like I said. The second one is a direct reduction in time losses. Well, you're spending manual QA time to cover the verifications which can be covered by automation. That's just a money saving.
Dmitry, thank you for your presentation. I have a small question maybe. For all this stuff, kind of assessment and doing the treatments as a result, when it better to do? At the beginning of the project, on regular basis, or at postmortem part, or everywhere? And how often if it's on regular basis?
Well, basically, at every stage of the process. If you didn't do it from the start, then probably you'd have to collect the team and start the therapy process. But if you're integrated with from the start and you're collecting fine data and you see the problems before they even start, then you should just use this 20%, like I said, to prevent the problems to begin. So, if you're making it from the start, you will evade the problems. If you're starting it at the last point of time, you'd have to gather a team and start the process of refactoring, development, and automation survey. Well, that's probably just two ways. Of course, it's always mixed, one an hour. Sometimes there are problems of specific sort. For example, we have only technical problems or only administrative problems. Sometimes you just don't have all the variety of problems. You're good.
Have you figured out that exactly 36 elementary actions make a test unmaintainable?
Oh, it's just by my practice. 36, it's kind of magic number. If it exceeds that, the test takes really more time for its maintenance rather than saving and working as it's supposed to save the QA time. I don't know how to explain it. It's statistic. Yet, of course, it goes worse and worse by increasing this amount of steps. So, 36 is a deadline where you have to do something with it, no matter what. Either throw it away or decompose it. Less is bad too. 10 is the magic number. Stick to it.
Hello, my name is Elena. Would you recommend to establish the code review practice and to dedicate the entire day for this, like you said, Friday, for example? And the second part of this question, what if we have the lack of time?
Well, now we're coming. First part of the question about the specific day for code review. I believe it's necessary. Maybe once a month it's good, like a team. Everyone from the team gathers and looks inside the code, just collecting some mistakes, developing best practices. Well, maybe it's worthwhile, but on a regular basis, you'd throw a day. You can spend the day for refactoring, for developing new tools, and you're spending it for review. It's, for me, by my opinion, it's unnecessary. And that should be on regular basis, but it's not a dedicated day. It's an everyday business. Every time you're making a merge request, someone should check it before it goes inside the code. It's regular basis, like brushing your teeth. And for the second part, I already forgot it. What was it? Lack of time? Oh, well, you see, that's the source of many problems, and probably this presentation came from the lack of time, because problems stacking one to each other. And if today you didn't resolve some lesser issue, tomorrow it may take 3 times more time for, just because it exists. So basically, technical debt will eat your time, and sometimes it's easier to get rid of the unwanted weight rather than keeping it and letting it consume more and more of your regular day expenses.
Thank you, Dmitry, for your presentation. It was wonderful. I just want to share our pain. We have those best practice, as you mentioned, to write best practices. But in reality, after 4 years, we need to maintain this. And it could take 20% of our whole work time to maintain these best practices. So we should be always very careful and responsible for that. What do you think about it?
About the time which is taken for maintaining the best practices. Probably you're, like I said, saving more time on not complying to them. And 20% of time is actually, it's here. 20% of time, it's in the bounds. So why is it a pain for you?
Because we have too much information, too many people writing in a wiki, I will say it. And sometimes we changed our squads between the whole big team, and we tried to lay on the information at this wiki, and it's usually really old and unpractical.
Well, that's...
Some people are gone during that time.
That's
the problem.
That's probably because you didn't create a registry. So it takes a lot of time to find the explanation into that almanac you created. No, there's just too much information, and people always add in some, and the old information becomes ancient, and you cannot use it no more, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's solved by a registry. You have to create links for navigation to navigate inside your project.
There are still too much links.
Well, probably someone should work on it.
Yeah, seems so. Thank you.
We're already out of time, so one last question, okay? Thank you, Dmitry, for your presentation. I have a question about if you are not the only one who works on automation in your team, maybe front-end developers work on automation, maybe back-end developer work, maybe someone else. And how do you deal, and what are your recommendations for dealing with redundancy? Because sometimes different people cover the same functionality in different layers of testing, and this creates redundancy, which then results in maintenance time, and how to deal with it.
All right. There are a few ways. First one is to actually store the code inside of the project. That will help them to communicate. It's just one project, front-end project with front-end tests, back-end project with back-end tests, and they will actualize the test, the code, which means you can blindly use the tests from the other team without ensuring of if we are working or not, because tests are developed with the application itself. Next thing is how to actually connect them. And connecting them, there's unlimited amount of ways. You can just share a folder and stack their JSON files to pass the data from one test to another. You can create test sets. You can manage it by some centralized system and pass the data from one test to another through API. But I would recommend in this place to get up to a higher level. It's called a business process testing. When you're testing not just when you're creating a block, a business block, and collect their test set number of tests, simple tests. For example, like you have a business process of creating an account in the system. There are a few verifications. First, create a new user, creating an address, maybe logging in. Well, there are different tests. But the test set is a complete and atomic business process of creating new user account. By that, you can leave this business process, this block, on one team support. And there you won't have to dig into this block itself. You'll have to integrate your other blocks. Did that. For example, next step would be don't know, creating a wiki page or something like that. That would be another business block into another team, and you can connect them simply by passing the user ID from one block to another. This way, you won't have to answer for the previous team, and it will simplify the process flow. Was it good? Or you have other questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Dmitry, for your talk. We're out of time, so yeah, thank you. And please, which question did you like the most?
Well, this man wanted this shot very much.
Okay.
I can't understand your presentation.